90'dan fazla ülkeden 11.000 öğrencisi ve 100'den fazla lisans ve lisansüstü programıyla öğrencilerini kaliteli bir eğitime ve aydınlık geleceğe davet ediyor. Genç bir üniversite olmasına rağmen İZÜ'nün başarısı uluslararası sıralamalarda da kendini göstermeye başladı. İZÜ, Green Metric Dünya Sıralaması'nda 2019 ve 2020 yıllarında dünyanın en iyi 500, Avrupa ve Asya'nın en iyi 200 üniversitesi arasına girdi. Bu yıl Cambridge IFA tarafından yüksek öğretimde 3G sosyal sorumluluk ödülüne layık görüldü. İZÜ, asil geçmişten aydınlık geleceğe.
Merhabalar.
Hello to all.
İstanbul Sabahattin Zaim Üniversitesi'nin düzenlediği Ermeni meselesini birlikte konuşabilmek
Symposium organized by the Istanbul Sabahattin Zaim University, talking the Armenian issue together. Welcome to our symposium once again. Today our most intense day of our symposium. First and foremost, I would like to thank our rector on behalf of our university, Professor Dr. Bulut. We would like to thank him. Assistant Professor Beytullah Kara,
değerli konuşmacılar konusunda büyük veri desteği sağlayan
Professor Kemal Çiçek for finding us our speakers from abroad and anyone who contributed to our symposium. Yesterday, in the opening session, we had a chance to discuss the legal aspect of the Armenian issue and its reflections on the Dutch press. It was a half day of a session, but today it will be much more intense. The moderator of our first session will be Professor Kemal Çiçek, and for the afternoon session, Professor Yusuf Halaçoğlu will be the moderator. Today, in the morning session, we have Patrick Walsh from Ireland. He will deliver a speech about the Armenia at the crossroads. And Professor Feridun Atta will present about the legal aspects of the deportation cases. Professor Ramazan Erhan Güllü will speak about the relations of the Ottoman Empire with the Patriarch. If you have questions, we will collect the questions from chat box and YouTube and address those questions to our professors. Yes, Mr. Kemal, the floor is yours.
Kemal Hocam, sesinizi açmanız
gerekiyor. By the way,
gerekiyor.
Professor, you have to unmute yourself. Good morning to all, dear friends. Welcome to the second day of this very important symposium organized by Istanbul Sabahattin Zaim University. We have 4 speakers today, including myself. Our first speaker is from Ireland, Patrick Walsh. He is a well friend of mine, actually, and he contributed a lot to this field with his researches, especially for the last 2 or 3 years. He has conducted very important projects in Azerbaijan, and he has deep researches about Karabakh and also the Caucasia. And we also would like to thank Istanbul Sabahattin Zaim University for inviting him, and specifically to Professor Mehmet Bulut. And without further ado, I'd like to yield the floor to Patrick Walsh. The floor is yours, sir.
Yes, thank you very much, Kemal. And nice to see everybody again. And thank you for the invite. It was very kind, and I feel honored to talk to you today. Just briefly, quickly, about who I am. I'm the author of this book, really. It's called The Armenian Insurrection and the Great War. That was written a few years ago, and it was basically, its subtitle was A Cautionary Tale of Betrayal, and it was about really Pastor Magian and his writings and really the sort of proof that there was an Armenian insurrection. Recently, I published this, Great Britain against Russia in the Caucasus, which is the subtitle, Ottoman Turks, Armenians and Azerbaijanis Caught Up in Geopolitics, War and Revolution. And it's a sort of like a very big book, which is about geopolitics in the 19th and early 20th century. And I've got a book coming out in about, I think, 2 or 3 weeks called 44 Days, Karabakh from Occupation to Liberation. So this talk I'm giving today really is partly from that book. It's called Armenia at the Crossroads. So with no more to do, I will start.
Recording in progress.
Okay. Just click that. Okay, now, so after its defeat in the Karabakh War, Armenia went into political turmoil. Around 20,000 protesters rallied in Yerevan on the 5th of December, chanting, "Nicole, you traitor," and "Nicole, go away." And they marched to the Prime Minister's official residence. Armenia's first president, Levan Ter-Petrosian, warned that civil war was possible and could end the country's statehood. So the new war for new territories resulted in an actual loss of conquered territory. Crowds that were infuriated by being told Armenian forces were driving the Azerbaijanis back to Baku, only to be confronted with a surprise defeat and imposed agreement, rallied in Yerevan, demanding the resignation of Pashinyan. It's evident Armenia stands at a political crossroads. One direction may lead Pashinyan, freed of the Karabakh War, into resuming a reformist agenda in Armenia and taking the country towards an accommodation with its neighbors. This would have the effect of enhancing Armenia's independence by establishing more stable and mutually beneficial relations within the South Caucasus. Following on from this, the elite still stood despite the opposition claims that the National Assembly no longer represented the popular will. On the 20th, by the decision of the people, of the defeat in an ill-advised war. Putin, Russia's proxy political groups in Armenia have banded together to propose veteran pro-Russian politician Vazgen Manoukian as an interim. The prospect of the Armenian people being congratulated by Russia's leadership when they overthrew Serge Sargsyan in April 2018. Putin has an influence in Armenia's withdrawal by Armenia from the occupied territories around Nagorno-Karabakh and a ratifications resulting from the trilateral agreement frustrated the aims of France. The US and Washington were rendered impotent by the sudden appearance and acceptance of the Russian plan. Armenia to overturn the trilateral agreement signed with Russia and Azerbaijan would be in this agreement both domestically and internationally are unacceptable. This was followed by a visit of the heavyweights of the Russian government, including the defense minister Sergei Shoigu, to Yerevan to impress on the Armenians that they would be up against it if they attempted to slide out of the agreement. The Russians knew the Armenian form well and suspected they might attempt to undermine the agreement. Shoigu emphasized that Russia intends not to allow for bloodshed in Nagorno-Karabakh from now on. I hope that there will be much work building peaceful life in Karabakh, and the main duty on our part is, of course, not to allow for bloodshed. We have arrived with a great plan. We hope we will implement it. When questioned about the unresolved status of the remaining part of Nagorno-Karabakh, Putin said, "The final status of Karabakh has not been settled. We have agreed that for now we will maintain the status quo existing today. What will happen next is to be resolved in the future by future leaders, by future participants in this process." So this suggests Putin sees a decision to be a generation away. Ambiguity is the order of the day. For Armenia, this was a warning to forget any aggressive moves it might consider making towards Karabakh. The Russian leader also stated he remained neutral as to what happened in Armenia as a result of their defeat in the war. Armenia is an independent sovereign state. It has the right to decide its internal affairs as it sees fit. During Putin's TV interview, the Russian leader also came to the Armenian Prime Minister's defense against accusations of betrayal. These accusations of treason against Pashinyan are absolutely baseless. There was certainly no treason here. Fyodor Lukyanov, editor-in-chief of the magazine Russia in Global Affairs, explained Putin's support in the following way. Naturally, there is no sympathy for Pashinyan in Moscow. Pashinyan did a bunch of stupid things that only exasperated Moscow's suspicions. At the same time, however, Moscow did not provide any support to his opponents. As far as I know, many weapons have been delivered to Armenia over the past weeks, openly or not. The military provided assistance. Karabakh is a completely different matter. Russia would never have fought for Karabakh, and Yerevan knew this very well. There was no reason to expect someone would help keep the officially recognized territory of another state under Armenian military and political control. Paul Stronsky of the Carnegie Endowment's Russia and Eurasia program points out that it's not a simple case of Moscow going back to the opposition. Moscow was never a real fan of Sergei Sargsyan either. Russia was in a tough bind. It could either intervene on Armenia's behalf, which would have fully alienated Baku, or it could stand back, let events play out, and eventually broker a ceasefire. Putin has gotten used to dealing with Pashinyan. A weakened Pashinyan probably suits him just fine. Putin's a pragmatic leader. He needs the armistice he arranged to stick. And the last thing Moscow wants in Yerevan was another revolution, an attempt to fight a rearguard action to continue the war. Such a development would be seen in the West as a failure of Lavrov's foreign policy, along with an inability to maintain Moscow's influence in the region, and therefore a signifier of a decline in Russia's power. The Moscow Times reported in November, Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan called on Saturday for greater military cooperation with Russia, a day after Azerbaijani troops began moving into disputed territory previously held by Armenia's separatist forces. So the thorough defeat Armenia suffered in Karabakh, it appears, temporarily chastened Armenia and its leader. The Armenian opposition, which had thoughts of overcoming the agreement, buckled under Moscow's pressure, which had the effect of making them see sense. Both Pashinyan and his opponents in Yerevan and Kankendi Stepanakert were outbidding each other in expressions of gratitude to Putin's Russia and declaring faith in the old alliance. Yerevan was firmly back in the Moscow orbit. The future of Pashinyan was in doubt, but what was not in doubt was Armenia's dependence on Russia. Armenia's defeat may strengthen Russia's hold over the country, at least in the short term. Pashinyan had flirted with the West, and this was a bad mistake. The argument is that Russia, in the final analysis, is the only reliable support Armenia has in the region. Historically, Tsarist Russia made an Armenian state possible through its colonization policy that concentrated dispersed Armenian population around Yerevan as frontiersmen. Bolshevik Russia saved Armenia in 1920 from complete collapse after the disastrous Dashnak mismanagement of the state, and many Armenians are conscious of this. Because Pashinyan's support remains and Russia needs stability in Armenia to continue its influence, it's likely to support Pashinyan for now. It doesn't have legitimate means to replace him, even if that is an intention. Therefore, it's feasible Moscow away from the Soviet Union, they had to create a relationship with Turkey. The new Armenian government under Ter-Petrosyan did not seek to press the genocide issue that the diaspora in the US were asserting so vigorously. Turkey facilitated the delivery of humanitarian aid to Armenia, even when it was in dispute with Azerbaijan over Karabakh and under blockade. It made its airspace, railways, ports available for the movement of goods in and out of Armenia. Trabzon was even earmarked as a port for Armenian trade with Europe, and plans were made to expand its facilities. At this point, the Armenian economy was in a state of collapse, and its gas pipeline and railroads through Georgia were cut off. Negotiations took place with Ankara to arrange the supply of 100,000 tons of EU wheat and electricity through the Turkish power grid. These agreements held out the prospect that Armenia and Turkey would develop a mutually beneficial relationship, which could lead on to normal diplomatic relations despite the past. The Yerevan government hoped this would bring them closer towards integration with the economies of Europe, breaking Russia's economic and political stranglehold on the country. Many in Turkey were also in favor of developing strong economic relations with their eastern neighbor, which was considered the only stable former Soviet state on its border. It was also hoped that economic cooperation would dampen down the genocide agitation and moderate the Armenians towards a peaceful solution of the Karabakh dispute. But what subverted this possibility was the Armenian behavior in the war during 1992-94. The massacres and vast ethnic cleansings carried out by their forces, some of whom had been formerly terrorists who assassinated Turkish diplomats and who bombed Turkish facilities, were simply too much for Turkish politicians to support. It was hard enough assisting the Armenians economically while they were waging war against Azerbaijan, but the pictures of Azerbaijani civilians lying dead in the mountains and Armenians stating they were eliminating the Turks, Ankara found it impossible to develop good relations. When the NKR forces seized the province of Kalbajar during April 1993, that was the last straw, and relations became openly hostile, moving toward actual war. The effect of all this was to move Yerevan closer to Moscow as a form of protection against Turkey in case the Turks intervened in the Karabakh War, something which would have sealed Armenia's fate. So the effect of the First Karabakh War and the ethnic cleansing of 750,000 Armenians of Azerbaijani, was therefore the ending of relations with Turkey and the copper fastening of Moscow embrace of Armenia. And then we had the Tashkent Agreement, which made it part of the CIS states collective security organization. Okay, and then in early 1994, Armenia agreed to the basing of Russian forces at Gyumri, paying for their base and having Armenian officers sent to Russian academies for training. And then there was a series of military protocols, and Armenia gradually became totally reliant on Russia for weapons, fuel, and other necessities. Armenia has never been able to escape Russia's embrace ever since, as a result of its antagonism with its neighbors, mainly caused by the effects of the Karabakh War. Okay, so I'm coming near the end, right? So I was going to go into recent developments, but I'll miss that out, and I will just talk about the possibility of the last, of what we're talking about, really, future prospects. The questions are, has Armenia developed a new sense of reality out of the 2020 defeat, or is it simply in another holding phase, expecting to return to its great territorial ambitions after it recuperates and sees another opportunity to return to unfinished business? Armenia has not just lost the territory it occupied as a result of defeat in the war. The financial cost of the war to Armenia is about equal to its total military expenditure for the last decade. It will take many years for Armenia to rebuild its army, and Russian help will come at a political price. Because of the war, Armenia has lost access to the natural resources it exploited over 30 years. So it is in a really bad state. There's a financial crisis going on in Yerevan, and the liberation of the occupied territories by Azerbaijan has also created problems for the energy security of Armenia. When all these losses are considered, it's unlikely that a better Armenian army will emerge in the near future than the one that was thoroughly defeated in 2020. The declining economy and devastating military responses all add up to the fact that Armenia would be ill-advised to attempt to increase military expenditure. If it does so, it will further damage the economy and produce greater emigration over the following decade. Far from strengthening its ability to mount another attack on Karabakh, this would most probably weaken it in human resources from all points of view. But particularly for the good of its actual people, Armenia would be well advised to give up its irredentist territorial claims on Karabakh and work with its neighbors to ensure the future prosperity of its citizens. From all this, it should now be apparent to Yerevan that its victory in 1994 was a Pyrrhic one. Karabakh proved a poison chalice for the Armenian people themselves, while the land grab at the collapse of the Soviet Union gave self-satisfaction to Armenian nationalism. It really destroyed the chances of good relations with its neighbors and put Armenia in isolation with a shattered economy and rapidly declining population. It became dependent on Russia, which had rescued it from defeat in 1992, and it could only look over enviously at the hidden defeat.
We should make a research in this field. It will be a general assessment. In the recent time, Turkey, related with the Armenian issue, there is an increase in the research field. And we see a huge amount of interest, but many of them are staying at the shallow level. There is a macro level of approach, and so it is essential to go into the depths. Micro level inspections and researches are also very contributing, but if you would like to have the general concept of genocide and genocide related issues, for example, we need to have a more global and a more comprehensive point of view. So starting from the micro level, somehow we should avoid to become isolated in our research, and we need to act more general and behave more general. When we speak about forced migration and when we speak about the issue of deportation and so-called genocide issues, we need to go in depth of the topics in every field. So I'm going to speak about my points very soon. Let me start from the easy one. All around the world, there are two important theses, genocide and against genocide thesis. And they sometimes express it as the Turkish and Armenian thesis, but I do not want to express it like that because there is no Turkish and Armenian issue anymore. When we look at the global research field, there is an increase in the content of the genocide research centers. So for this reason, the topic have become broader, and it is not only a monopolical topic within the hands of Armenia. And it is essential to mention that if you would like to make the classification more clear, and if you look how we need to make research in this field, up until now, all of the theses related with genocide have been classified before via YouTube. We make a broadcast, and since that we are doing this broadcast on YouTube, our people are also watching. People from the public audience are also watching, and let's see how they are approaching with the general public opinion. Armenian people, during the, of course, when they approach the issue, they name it as so-called genocide. I mean, Turkish people have had actually have victimized Armenian people, so they are somehow assaulting, and they believe that they are being victimized by the Turkish side, and there is no space for questioning this issue, and there is no way to ignore this fact. And according to the general point which they have arrived, the Armenian genocide was being actually pre-planned event, and due to, of course, violation of their rights and also any extermination of their rights, it was being actually practiced among them. When we approach this issue with an academical point of view, it is so weak in content. And it is not fully proven, and it is not actually to have clear-cut evidences. When we speak about the real means of actually Armenian genocide and the genocide agreement itself, it is only including the content of hatred discourse. And actually, Armenian people somehow trying to victimize themselves, and they do have two hypotheses. And when we look at these hypotheses, they are very old in fashion. And what is formulating these hypotheses? Muhakim Gadrian, an Istanbuli Armenian sociologist. And first of all, he's going to Germany and having some studies in the United States and developed his hypothesis. First of all, his approach to non-Muslim societies and Muslim societies and the Ottoman system is they have had the secondary citizenship attitudes, faced with such kind of secondary citizenship attitudes. And as a result of this, with the enforcement of freedom, Party of Union and Progress, they are speaking about the Turanian policies, and with these Turanian policies, within the structure which is being created with pan-Turanism approach, is not allowing any Armenians to be involved in, is not leaving any space to them. So there are a lot of academical research opposing this idea and burning out these claims, but it is not within the scope of our discussion today. So what is essential to be done on the Armenian side is as follows. If they think that they have been insulated, they have been excluded, and we should prove that, of course, the contrary side. And also, Talat, Emir, and Cemal Pashas, the general founders of Union and Progress Party, they are having the idea of composing a Turkish nation and excluding all of the non-Turkish citizenship approach. So somehow we oppose. This is the general two concepts and two claims that they are proposing to the world, being the secondary citizenship and also being excluded by the Union and Progress Party. Cemal Pasha and Enver Pasha's biographies and memoirs, of course, are having a lot of researches. And within those, they have been killed with assassinations. And actually, somehow, these assassination actions are trying to be justified since because of their behaviors against non-Muslim people, Armenian people. They have deserved this, is the general opinion. And of course, when we speak about the policies of Union and Progress Party, it is a homogeneous structure. It is not excluding any sect, any party, any Jewish people, any Arabic people, any Cherkessian people. So it has got a multilateral content as the members of the party. So it is really including a huge amount of diversity. And in the entrance of the First World War, with the Armenian people, with the Greek people, with the Jewish people, they were working together. They were keeping them within themselves, despite these assaults and these actually accusers. Of course, we see the first pieces of writings about Armenian problem, which are related with the statue of Armenian people and their statue within the structure of the state. The famous Blue Book. What type of a title does it own? Ottoman Empire's attitude towards Armenian people. The selection of this title is not a coincidence, indeed. Just like that, Armenian Protestant Pope Johannes Alexius' book is also pointing out the same claim, Germany and Armenian people. Those literature pieces are basically pointing out the fact that Armenian people have had a secondary position within the society, Ottoman society. So they have been, they are having an accusing approach. They are having a blaming approach. And when we go to June 1970s, all of these literary pieces are finding place. When we look at these literary pieces, actually, those pieces have been written during the post-war time, during the Paris peace agreements took place as an argument. They have been written, so we should not ignore this fact. The people who are reading these books are having a perception, a misperception. Armenian people are victims, and also the Ottoman people, the members of the Union and Progress Party, are the actually big malefactors and murderers. Talat Pasha, Dr. Rashid, Dr. Bahattin Shakir, Cemal Azmi, Nusret Bey type of statesmen have especially been selected, and of course the genocide has been created as a planned actually termination process. So these are all claims. Actually, it is not a spontaneous event which occurred all of a sudden. So there was actually a real means of Holocaust plan inside it, they claim. And Armenians consciously and by leading by the Union and Progress Party in 1919, they have established a special court, and this court it has based its claims on the researches of very important researchers. And Nemesis was the organization which Armenian people have established. They were the assassin communities, and this organization have had assassination actions against the names which I have counted. In 1921, they have started to do it, and they have been successful, unfortunately. And they have killed those people. And of course, within the eye of the court, they were the murderers, but they have escaped and they could not be caught. And they have claimed that they should, the names, the pashas were, of course, urged. It was mandatory, it was obligatory to murder them because they have violated rights of Armenian people. And of course, there is a general declaration during this time, which was claiming that those assassination actors were the victims, and they should not be followed, they should not be taken under custody or arrested, was the general perception of Europe at those times. After placing those opinions front, I would like to express one more thing. Of course, another important Armenian issue is Talat Enver and Cemal Pasha's actions and their bad attitude towards the Armenian people were aimed to be documented. Wellington House has been established as a propaganda office with MR6 by MR6. They have established it in the UK. This structure was being supported with American missionaries, and they have used it to collect some intelligence information data, and they have never actually mentioned about any violation of Ottoman Empire people by the hands of the Armenian guerrillas, and it is not speaking about any other aspect related with the real means of Armenian problem against the Ottoman Empire statespeople. Armenian communities have created a literature of hatred and anger. And a third thing to be mentioned, about the Armenian thesis, in the last 50 years, they are focusing on the concept of Holocaust. Holocaust is not widely being studied in our country at the universities. Nazis against the Jewish people and the Holocaust studies are very few in number. However, in the last 50 years, whatever the Armenian people have done within the Holocaust literature do have some certain basic features, just like 1948 UN Holocaust Agreement has been legalized because of some legal basis. And what is being taken into account on the Armenian side, it is essential for them to create a Holocaust literature. In Turkey, we do not show a great interest. We ignore this fact. There is a conscious, actually, selection here. There's a conscious tendency here. Why they are creating a Holocaust literature? Because they were trying to accuse the Union and Progress Party members to be nationalist, and they were having an actually hatred against Armenian people. They were showing actually very bad behavior against Armenian people, and this threatening policy is not an open state policy from different and hidden organs of the state. They were hiding their actions against Armenian people, and conspiracy theories within this Holocaust literature is being created. So we need to look at this side in depth without ignoring these facts. Armenian side has got more advantage when we compare it with the Turkish side, because they do have a template, a Holocaust template, which they are fitting themselves in. However, on the Turkish side, people who are approaching to these theses with a positive attitude are not in a consensus, just like the Armenian people. There are four major approaches about the Armenian problem. The first thesis is the nationalist thesis. In this categorization, in this classification, it belongs to Haktan Yavuz. And within this categorization, only the politicians are believing in. The second one is the national security. And the national security category, Bernard Lewis, Justin McCandless, Edward Erickson, Andrew Melder, İlber Artay, Jeremy Sor, Murat Bardakçı, and Yücel Güçlü, and you can also count my name. So the people who are placing forth the national security thesis is the second category. And I won't be getting into the details of this thesis. Arnold Palmy, in his book, is pointing out the fact that deportation has been carried out due to some security reasons. And it was actually illegal. It was a fair and illegal action to be done at those times due to security reasons. And the third thesis actually is the thesis of slaughter. What is being mentioned as slaughter? It is the Holocaust. And Murat Belge, Bastı Moran type of actually academicians, massacre, or we can call it as massacre. The relation, in order not to actually not to use genocide word, G word, they are using another word, which is the mistreatment, in a good way of saying. So in this mistreatment terminology, it is against the nationalist and security thesis. So they are fully against, squarely against. Let me summarize my opinion. They are not calling it treatment or so-called, how we can say, the fourth one, when we come to the fourth thesis, is the Islamic thesis. They do have a total different picture. When we compare it with the previous three theses, they claim that actually There are very popular historians. They're not directly related with this field. The Islamic thesis supporters are the fans of Abdülhamit II. And of course, Cemal Enver and Talat Pasha, the Union and Progress Party, is their favorable party. Armenian guerrilla actions were right according to them. Yes, the Armenians have been involved in actually guerrilla activities, and they have been the actually stick of imperialist powers, so they are deserving to be accused. So a deportation decision was right and appropriate to practice. When we go into the depths of Islamic thesis, they are going far beyond. Yes, deportation was something right and appropriate to be done, but they're also developing some different arguments, even going to the rightful share, rightful due point. And the ones who are supporting this Islamic thesis, the Islamic side of Turkey, are accepting that there is a massacre of Armenian people, but there is no intention of Holocaust. This is their belief. They are as a threatening group of people as actually the Holocaust supporters. I have 6 minutes or 7 minutes left, I think. Let me say 10 minutes left. In this limited time, I would like to focus on two approaches. What type of Armenian research strategy should be developed? I would like to point your attention to that. Let me start from the Armenian side. If we know what they are doing, we can act according to this fashion. So it is important to understand this. What are the Armenian thesis supporters are doing? After the actually agreement, they are starting to write Holocaust stories. And they are actually writing about the people who have supported Cherkezian Hasan, for example, is a very important name. This is not a coincidental selection. They have published such kind of a story in 1920s in Ottoman Empire newspapers, but why it was being placed forward? Because they were aiming to create Holocaust-like story for themselves. Another story is the encrypted deportation orders. When they have arrived these orders, there were some heroes on their side who were actually decoding the encrypted telegraphs, deportation telegraphs, who is Andonian, for example. He's decoding the Union and Progress telegraphs, and he's not approaching the idea of deportation with a good intention. And so they were being taken away from their responsibility. Mamur Celal, for example, on their side, was a big supporter of Armenian people. They are creating their own heroes, protagonists. We don't ignore Naim Andonian, Hasan Avcı, and Celal Avcı. We don't approach it like this. I don't have such kind of name. They may have such kind of protagonist figures, but I'm over-exaggerating those figures and in placing them within the literature is only actually an aim to create Holocaust-like environment, Holocaust-like history. And another important action is the gas rooms in Trabzon. Actually, it doesn't have any documentation, it doesn't have any proof, and they claim that there were gas rooms in Trabzon. It is all actually signed to resemble to the Holocaust. Auschwitz camps, for example, Auschwitz camps, they were actually disastrous places. I have seen all of these places when I go to those gas chambers, for example. And Armenian people are creating stories just like in Nazi stories, and they are telling stories as if they have been just imprisoned in gas chambers. No, it is not happening like that. They have been, of course, limited in some certain actually villages. Derzol, for example. Derzol is a mythical environment, mythical place. Derzol is a bare land, and it's a very productive area. Deserts are really present, but they were not being deported to the desert, Derzal Desert. It is the southeastern part of Anatolia, which was so much productive and nearby. Actually, during this 9-month deportation period, they have stayed in Euphrates, nearby Euphrates River. And 1919, the number of the Armenians are reaching to more than 600,000 people. Where did they come from? So they don't have any bases. They don't have any records. All of this creating camp image and gas chamber image, creating that desolate and isolated desert image, and creating, this monster-like Cherkessian people or Rudolph-like gigantic creatures are not coincidental, actually. Let me summarize. And it was created but it's a pseudo-archive. And when we speak about these figures and when we speak about the Turkish academical research, unfortunately, we don't find any opposing idea, any opposing claim. This is another point of discussion, but we don't have any factual evidence to oppose these ideas. I'm going to conclude within a few minutes. Is this story right? Of course it is not right. I was working with Yusuf Halaçoğlu at Turkish History Center, Historical Society. And what was the level of presence of international affairs, Ottoman international affairs? What was the presence of foreigners at the states, at the government? In order to understand whether they have Taceddin Kayıoğlu, for example, a very important researcher who is working actually and studying in the field of international officers of Ottoman Empire and Turkish Historical Society, published it. And Hakan Yavuz has got some dissertations, PhD dissertations. Rafael Lentin, Paul Guenes is a very important researcher working on this, and it's a very important fact in the literature. Cemal Aydin has worked about the aids which were given for Armenian people and Lebanon Armenians. There are many fields to study, to go in depth, to focus on. Justin McCartney, for example, is focusing on the Van Zeytun and Sassoon revolts. And I myself try to bring it forward. I do not want to go beyond my time so much. There are a lot of things to be mentioned, but Muslim minority affairs. I have written an article in English, and I'm speaking about the İttihat and Terakki Party. And I have tried to focus on whether this party, the party of Union and Progress Party, was a nationalist party or not. I have discussed this. Actually, when we speak about the real means of Turkism in Turkey, it has never been a big matter. And until the 1920s, 1930s, we don't see such kind of a Turkist approach. And all of the boycotts against the foreigners' goods have been exaggerated. Look, suppress the revolts. Of course, there were some actions which were being taken. Nicholas Warndorf is a very important researcher, and last but not least, Edward Ericsson's study is speaking about the 20th century and claiming that Ottoman Empire did not have any deportation actions. Actually, British and also United States examples can be referred in Africa, for example. It is only an imitation of those actions. So there are some books, recent publications of Edward Erickson. I mean, the book which I have just mentioned should be translated in Turkish very soon. It was published by the end of 2019. It's a very important study, and Nicholas Wandorf's study. I have gone through, also made a determination Ottoman Researchers Archive. I would like to conclude my speech by saying that we need to follow the Holocaust literature very closely, and we need to follow the latest arguments, read them in depth, understand them, and we need to develop counter arguments against these arguments. And when we are doing all of these, we need to understand that Turkey should have an independent, private budgeted research institute, because in the recent years all around the world, Holocaust Researchers Union was established, and there are leftist and conservative sides. They are approaching it in different ways. In order to involved in this network, we need to establish a research center, and Higher Education Institute chair have had a declaration to establish, but they are aiming to create it under the structure of higher education system or under the control of the state, and it will be a victim of the bureaucracy if they do not establish it independently. Okay, without losing our time any further, I would like to pass the floor to Feridun Ata.
He will deliver a speech about the 1919 military court cases. Mr. Feridun, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Professor. First and foremost, I would like to extend my deepest respect to everyone. I would like to thank the organizing committee. I also would like to extend my deepest respect to the other professors who listen us in this session and the YouTube followers. In my speech, I will be speaking about the deportation cases and the court trials, because those verdicts are deemed as evidence for the so-called genocide. So in my speech, I will assess this court from a legal perspective, because the legal aspect of the court and after its foundation is quite problematic, and I would like to attract your attention to that problematic legal aspect. Well, the previous speaker has also mentioned that this court has been used as an evidence for the so-called genocide. In 2005, there was this case, the Doğu Perinçek case, which was held in Switzerland. And as Mr. Doğu Perinçek was defending the case, he stated that the Armenian genocide is an international lie, and since it was deemed as actually a crime in Switzerland, he was tried in Switzerland, and he actually expressed his opinion under the freedom of expression. And the court has taken this decision of incriminating Doğu Perinçek 5 in favor, 2 against. But after this court has been brought to the attention of the European Court of Human Rights, it was stated that this decision is against the freedom of expression. So at the end of the day, Doğu Perinçek stated that since no court so far has decided the Armenian question to be deemed as a genocide, two prosecutors actually stood against this decision. One of them is Pinto. Most probably the Armenian community has stated that the Armenian question was subject to court trials during 1919 and 1920. Especially they pinpointed the Talat Pasha. And according to the third article of the verdict, it was stated that not only Switzerland recognizes the Armenian genocide, and the institutes and the government during that time in Turkey has also accepted the genocide they claimed. I mean, showing the so-called court as a precedent, and they also actually put forward the death sentence implemented for Enver Pasha, but it is not possible to come to a conclusion that the Turkish government itself recognized the genocide, because at that time no word such as genocide is used. And the same prosecutors stated that the Turkish court itself has recognized that the deportation and the massacres have been carried out by the decision of the Political Party of Union and Progress. But no word such as massacre, slaughter, or genocide is used by the Turkish court. According to the Criminal Code of the Ottoman Empire, Article 45, the murder word is used and opted for, which is not an equivalent for massacre or genocide. So Talat Pasha is not sentenced to death because of the Article 45, but rather 55. They have been sentenced to death not because of the Armenian issue, but due to the violation of the constitution and trying to overthrow the government and trying to change the state regime. These were the accusations behind the verdict of sentencing Talat Pasha to death, and they also made connections with the high port uprisings. And the accusations regarding to Enver and Talat Pasha was listed under 5 sub-items, and only one of them is related to the Armenian question. So taking those issues into consideration, the Switzerland court cannot arrive at a decision of defining those court decisions of the Ottoman time as genocide based on Talat and Enver Pasha trials. So this court, which recognized the so-called decision of the Ottoman court as a genocide, let's assess their legal grounds. On 28th of October 1918, before the ceasefire agreement was signed, as the war doesn't come to an end, from Baghdad MPs, Mr. Fuat, on 28th of October, presented a resolution in the parliament. According to that resolution, Talat and Said Halim Pashas by the way, back that time, the Enver Pasha was still in Istanbul. They didn't leave the country. And this MP presented a resolution to the parliament. And this resolution is comprised of 10 articles. Of course, I will not count all those articles one by one because time will not be enough. But I would like to attract your attention to a couple of articles. The ones who are supporting the Armenian genocide states that Mr. Fuat, in order to support the Armenian question, presented a resolution in the parliament. The 5th article is really important, according to that motion, and it follows as such. By issuing temporary law, the Ottoman Empire was dragged to a disaster. And no Armenian word is actually mentioned and articulated in the Article 5. And on the 10th article, according to that motion, it is stipulated that by dragging the empire into chaos, there are the ones who are the partners in such crimes and perpetrators, and the Switzerland court are using the Article 5th and the 10th of that motion in order to find a basis for their decision in favor of the Armenian genocide. So this was an important starting point for those courts in order to initiate actually questioning the perpetrators of the time. During the war, the parliament was silent. Said Halim Pasha government and Talat Pasha governments were saying that I am aware of my responsibilities, but they say that, they will be asking for their perpetrations. And that's why the court states that as those pashas have been trialed in the courts, the parliament actually fulfilled its responsibilities. But still, we know that the Article 5th of this aforesaid motion has nothing to do with the Armenian genocide articulation or Armenian deportation. This 5th article doesn't actually cover only the temporary law covering the Armenian deportation, but all the temporary laws. And Sadrazam, Halim Pasha, the Grand Vizier Halim Pasha says that with the 5th article, what is being covered is ambiguous. The 5th article covers not only the Armenian relocation, but all the temporary laws being issued back then. Because as the war continues, as you know, the parliament was closed. And as a result, the temporary laws were enacted in order to be ratified later by the parliament. That was the logic behind those temporary laws issued during those times. After the Fuat-based motion, a discussion was going to be initiated. The ministers of the Political Party of Progress and Union, Said Pasha and others, they will be they were going to be trialed, but in which court? In the 31st article of the Ottoman Empire Constitution, it is stipulated that a minister can be trialed after the ratification of the parliament, but there is a need for a special clause for the trial of the ministers. But such a special clause was not enacted until that time. That's why a new law is asked to be enacted through a motion. Fuat Bey, who was the Minister of Interior Affairs, acknowledges that such a special clause for the trial of the minister is not existed. But even a new law is being enacted, it cannot be executed retrospectively. That's why he says that the ministers can only be trialed and listened to by the courts of the war, military courts. As the parliament was dissolved due to the war, this investigation of the aforesaid ministers was not carried out. As a result, the pressure coming from the opponents of the political party of Progress and Union actually showed us that there is a gap in the legislation. This gap is not valid only for the ministers, by the way. It is also valid for the bureaucrats, because the legislation regarding to the court trials of the bureaucrats were missing. That's why the Musul MP Fazıl Bey presented a motion stating that, some bureaucrats have carried out and perpetrated crimes against the Muslims and the non-Muslims, but it is not covered in the legislation how those bureaucrats will be trialed and put in front of the court. And the court decisions are taken very slowly. As a result, the investigations can last many years. And until that time, maybe the ones who are suspected of those crimes will be passing away anyway. So according to the 23rd article of the Constitution, no person under the roof of the Ottoman Empire can be listened by the court other than the Ottoman courts. And in addition to that, apart from special courts, no special commission for hearing those trials can be established, can be founded. So at the end of the day, the ministers of the political party of Progress and Union cannot be heard in a special court as the Constitution dictates. As a result, those decisions cannot be seen as a genocide. So I would like to speed up since my time is running out. Of course, the legal councils of that time stated that, those legal issues were still discussed because the procedure regarding to the hearing of those perpetrators were not clear. That's why Sultan Vahdettin, Tevfik Pasha, they were trying to find a legal remedy in order to hold those trials. Of course, the Sultan was, assessing this issue from political perspective. And as a result, the Sultan, Vahdettin, didn't have the intention to listen to the Constitution because he actually deemed this problem as a matter of independence. By implying the Party of Progress and Union, he stated that they are the occupiers and invaders. So we should actually resolve this problem before the European courts could arrive at a decision about this issue. So he stated that we should solve this problem internally. And he stated that the 13th article of the Constitution will resolve the problem. According to this article, it is stated that in the extraordinary times, the government has the authority to implement the martial law and at the same time can establish the special courts. And under the martial law, the government has the legal authority to establish this martial courts, and that's how this martial court is being established. But the fact that the martial court was established, it doesn't solve the legal aspect of the problem or constitutional aspect of the problem, because according to that explanation, the martial court was established for pragmatic reason. And the Tevfik Pasha government states that the martial court is different from the courts covered by the common law. And the martial courts was founded for different purposes, and they are unique and sui generis in its nature, and that's why they stated that the martial courts was established for pragmatic purposes, thereby lacking the legal grounds. And Tevfik Pasha was, of course, under a lot of pressure. And on 5th of February 1919, the Armenian deportation cases were initiated to be heard. But the legal gap was still there, and it led to the criticism by the occupying forces, the invading forces, and the Progress and Union Party. That's why a change in the law was presented to the Sultan, but Sultan Sultan vetoed this amendment in the law. As a result, the change in the law, amendment in the law, was not ratified. And Tevfik Pasha was also criticized by the Sultan, saying that no sentence was issued against the party members. And that's why he was overthrown from his position. The fact that the Sultan didn't ratify this amendment because it was against the constitution, it is a right decision, but the Sultan didn't actually accept and confirm this amendment because Tevfik Pasha didn't issue any sentences against the political party members of Progress and Union. And then Damat Ferit actually replaced him, and Ferit Pasha assured that I will hear the MPs of the Progress and Union Party in court, and as a result, he found a new legal remedy for trying them, and this was actually the decree of 1873. According to that decree, it doesn't matter who violated the public order and the constitution can be heard in the court martial, and that's how Ferit Pasha founded this court martial, stating that the legal grounds are existed. But I have to state this, although my time is running out. Ferit Pasha, in order to hear the Progress and Union Party ministers in court, he tried to find a legal justification for the foundation of court-martial as follows. Threatening the security and the safety of the government and the implementations like deportation and relocations are the individual crimes perpetrated by the ministers. So this is a long shot interpretation, by the way. So no minister can actually take the decision of deportation or relocation without authority. So we cannot actually define those crimes as individual perpetrations. I mean, if those individuals could organize those crimes with the support of the ministry, then of course they will be heard under the court-martial, but they stated that these were individual crimes rather than administrative crimes. Of course, there are many discussions ongoing about the legality of that aspect. So within 5 minutes of a time frame, I try to prove that this decision lacked the legal grounds. And I also would like to spend my last 5 minutes to the issues which are wrenching our consciousness. And let me present a couple of examples. There are the investigations of the 1915 and 1960s. So the sentences issued regarding to those investigations should have resolved the problem, but the previous decisions have already shown that these investigations and the legal proceedings couldn't possibly be just and fair. According to the law, those people should have been trialed in the local courts, but they have been sentenced due to the decision arising out of the Istanbul courts. As a result, the issue of locality doesn't actually concern And such decisions have been, by the way, intervened by the French and British invading forces. As a result, they believed that the decision that they desired will be coming out of the Istanbul courts. And in addition to that, I mean, the prosecutors were not comprised of the people from the legal background, and they were comprised of the soldiers. And the suspected people, I mean, the plaintiffs didn't have the right to ask for legal counsel. I mean, if this is the case, how can we speak about the legality of the decision taken by those courts? For the Yozgat deportation case, different witnesses have been listened to, which elongated to the proceedings. As a result, the Ferit Cemal Pasha, who was the Minister of Interior Affairs, didn't accept listening to different witnesses for the sake of not elongating the time frame allocated for the adoption of the decision. I would like to present another example. Hashim Bey was desired to be acquitted from his crimes, and Sheikhul Islam wasn't given the death sentence, but he was sentenced to 15 years of serving time in prison. And he stated, and he asked this question, I mean, we shouldn't hear those people according to the constitution, but they should be heard under the court-martial. So this is clearly an indication that those trials have been carried out for the sake of vengeance. The members of the political party Progressive and Union was tried for the sake of vengeance, and as a result, the prosecutors and the witnesses tried to affect the martial court. Well, according to the statements, there are statements that actually the gallowses are not deserved by the MPs of the political progress and union, so the trials are not enough. More violence should be implemented for those MPs. I mean, those statements clearly show that a just and fair decision couldn't be arrived in those courts. So, in a nutshell, as a conclusion, those courts were biased. As a result, their decisions were against the constitution, and those decisions were not legal. And the sentences are executed by sacrificing the impartiality of the courts. As a result, those decisions are illegal, and these decisions are taken for the vengeance. As a result, those decisions cannot be accepted as a precedence for defining those events as genocide. Thank you very much.
Profesör Feridun Ata'ya biz çok teşekkür ediyoruz.
We would like to thank Professor Feridun Ata.
İstanbul işgal altındayken yapılan bu mahkemeler Ermeni tezlerini destekleyenler tarafından
which have been taken during the invasion time of Istanbul have widely been used by the Armenian Holocaust supporters. And those courts establishments and also the judging ways are fully against the constitutional law, and the right of advocating himself or herself was not being allowed to the individuals. And now our next speaker will be pointing out a different situation for us during the First World War. The relationships between the Patriarch and Ottoman Empire will be presented by him. Thank you very much, everyone. Other than the First World War, I'm going to start from 1908, and I'm going to move towards the First World War. UN Kemal Hoca has summarized the so-called Armenian genocide issue in depth, and one of the basic arguments starting from 19,000s is reaching to the level of actually to a different point with the constitutional monarchy. And when we look at the exemptions, they are not actually exemptions which is being provided for Armenian people. When we look at the relationships between the state and the patriarch, and also when the war has started, what was the position of the relations will be the main point of my topic. When we start the topic, we need to look at what were these issues when we speak about autocratic type of ancient type of exemptions. And patriarchal was being established. Would you please rise up your voice a little bit more? You are not clearly being heard. Let me try to speak louder. Fatih the Conqueror, when he conquered Istanbul, he has established the church. He has created the infrastructure for a patriarch. And in the following years, patriarch has reached to its present times status, and it's an intermediary institution between the actually Armenian people and also the Sultan. On behalf of Armenian people, any type of political demands, any type of religious demands, and anything related with the state policy is being intermediated by the hand of the patriarch. And with the structural changes in the Ottoman Empire, with the reforms in the Ottoman Empire in 1839, many things have changed. And when we look at the new formation of the law, the patriarch have started to have its own independent structure, independent parliamentary structure. And of course, with the edict of the reforms, it has gained an independent structure. There are some claims. After the edict of the reforms, the royal edict of the reforms, it is based on some constitutional law conditions. And with relationship of Ottoman Empire with the Western countries have deregulated, and of course the ancestors' structural constitutional structures have started to be reorganized. And when we speak about the structures here, we are speaking about the parliamentary. During the Abdulhamid, it continued, and the Sultan Abdulhamid was not seeing it valid actually during the Abdulaziz times, which was being actually mentioned. It said actually text which is valid, you should totally terminate it or you should apply it. Sultan Abdulhamid could not totally take it away, and he didn't want to apply it, and he has been accused of acting against the law. And the similar discussions are going to, of course, the reform time. After 1908, in the Ottoman Empire, there are some basic changes, and similar to Armenians, there's also a contradicting structure actually after the reform and after the actually enactment of the actually edict of the reforms. The constitutional law was the main pillar of those actions which were taken by the Sultan. The state was all having a law for its own constitution, and on the other side, there are some actually constitutional regulations the code of practices, which is related with the non-Muslim societies, and it was creating conflicts. All of the discussions during the Sultan Abdulhamid time, during the time of Progress and Union Party, could not also be enacted. And of course, they wanted the constitutional law to be the only valid document by creating some certain allies among the religious institutions. They wanted all of these code of practices to be accepted as non-valid and against the constitutional law. Non-Muslims were acting as if they were having two different types of constitutional law. All of their religious life and social lives were carrying on with this, and the Muslim society was totally being adapted and also regulated with the hand of the constitutional law. It was creating an unequal environment according to the statements of Progress and the Union Party. And the state wanted to get rid of this dualist structure. In 1912, let me give you an example. Kemal Bey has just presented very efficiently. The Progress and Union Party members did not act anything for anything with a Turkish approach. In 1912, in order to get rid of this dualist structure, the state is having some discussions when they are going to deliver the actually responsibility, when they're having their letters, when they're receiving their certificate of a patriarch. We do have the regulations and we do have the constitutional law articles. So if you start to act as an Armenian patriarch, and if you create a substructure, an independent structure within your patriarchal parliamentary structure, you are creating a dualist citizenship, and this is being unmeaningful to own the identity of Ottoman citizenship. So let's not use nation, the concept of nation they have stated. Let's use nation for Ottoman people. Let us be the member of Ottoman Empire. Any type of religious and also ethnical concepts will be used for the communities. I mean, the Turkish community belonging to the Ottoman Empire and Armenian community belonging to the Ottoman Empire. So in order to get rid of and overcome the dualist structure, they have started to take further step. And in order to keep the community spirit within inside the Ottoman Empire structure, they have created such kind of an alternative. But the private and the civilian side of the patriarch objected this proposal, and reciprocal meetings have taken place and negotiations have taken place since the beginning of the reforms, and which has been created as the Ottoman Empire citizenship have become something unsuccessful. They have wrote a proposal from the Ottoman side, and they have tried to surround and only a certain definition to the citizenship. And it was being accused of deteriorating and distracting this unity from the other side. But there were two different perceptions opposing and actually argumenting. And they could not overcome this, the argumentative approaches. And when they have started to enact the constitutional law during Abdulhamid time, the Armenian revolt have caused to deport the Armenian patriarch in Jerusalem. He has stayed for a while, and all of a sudden he has returned back as a hero, and he has taken his patriarch chair once more as a hero. So they have created a political environment on the patriarchal side, and the Armenian weaponized guerrilla revolt have become something legitimized, and this patriarch was being presented as a victim of the Ottoman Empire, and bringing him back to his own responsibility, and also legitimizing him in the eye of the Ottoman community, have just created a different environment. Isminian have been brought to a higher level, to a higher authority, and he did not continue his patriarch responsibility and went back to Armenia. And this actually governmental dispute have created an unfair situation, and they have claimed that more than 10 years he has been victimized by being deported. So they have created some unfair statements, but this is not changing the main principles. The Patriarch institution, during their relationship with the Ottoman Empire, was owning actually intermediary power. In 1908 and 1914, 4 patriarchs have been in charge, and Ismilian have been for a few months, and then Yeniçeri Tuğyan is coming until 1911, and after him Ohannes Ashurina, and after 1913 Patrick Zani is coming into force. And Patrick Zani during the wartime has got more swear and also perversive type of statements, and also he did not hesitate to join forces with the Ottoman Empire, but the Patriarch institution has already become an institution which was acting independently, so it lost its intermediary power and intermediary responsibility. And among the civilians were being the members of more radical parties and more radical sides. On one side, there is the parliament of the state. On the other side, there is the patriarch parliamentary system. And there are some people who are trying to bring those two different forces together, negotiate those two different forces together. And among the Armenian communities, the conflicts between different groups brought higher tension and brought a negative environment. And another discussing point is the security problem in Eastern Anatolian part of the country. By the end of 1909, after the Adana events, Patriarch is stating that the Kurdish sects have continuously attacked these regions, and they have asked the state to intervene the situation and control it. In 1913 May, Ohannes Ashuruni is pointing out a further issue, and he's stating that if you cannot provide a security to the South Anatolian part of Turkey, it is going to bring a problem, conflict situation among the Turkish and Armenian people, and it is going to bring a big destruction among two sides. I would like to read a paragraph from the Patriarch's statement. What we want is keeping our life and protecting and preventing our actually well-being and also honor. And also Armenians are having the torture of Kurdish people. Every day we are having these complaints. The Kurdish people are ignorant people, and they are they're having bad acts and among Armenian people, and the state should solve this problem as soon as possible because they are carrying on actually plundering actions. And in Handia regions, for example, they have got high level of complaints. So it is a very important milestone for the relationships between the Patriarch and the state. Mehmet Zeki Pasha has been resigned from his duty, and then they have tried to control the Kurdish actually sects attacks against Armenian people in those lands. However, the people who believe that, who are not trying to actually lose their power in those lands, I mean the tribes, the clans, the Kurdish clans and the Kurdish tribes who are attacking against people were being perceived as the Muslims against Armenians. So they have somehow tried to actually make use of this feature, and it became, of course, a huge level of criticism, and the state could not overcome this situation, this conflict situation. Abdulhamid times and also the reform time practices are essential to be discussed in detail. The basic problem was the criticism against the Kurdish actually plans, and they could not prevent it. And Patriarch is stating that if this process continues like this, I myself, as the spokesperson of the Patriarch institution, Mertens, we need to act together, and it is something positive, and it's being supported from his statements. And when we look at the discourse of that time, there is a boycott action, and so there is an action against the whole community. When we actually look at this, it is being transformed into an argument to support the Holocaust, so-called Holocaust claims. But it is not something actually right when we look at the documents and when we look at the petitions as the documents, archive documents. Another important problem that the Patriarch has faced is coming with the armed conflicts, because the Armenian side has supported Russia and acted against Ottoman Empire during the First World War. And the Patriarch has been in a very bad bottleneck situation. Officially and non-officially, it was not possible for them to present any declaration about the situation. And in a probable situation, it became an institution which would support Armenians against the Ottoman Empire. And of course, during the beginning of the wars, or just a few months before the war, many regions, the churches were not having the popes, which the Patriarch was assigning. Samson in Bafra and some actually Eastern Anatolian region, the Patriarch was not able to select and assign the popes. And the popes were being selected by the armed forces in those regions. They could not prevent and protect the security, and even they could not assign the actually patriarchal popes to the regions with their own hands because of the civilian actually actions in those regions. And they were totally losing their power. So there was, of course, an increase in the tension between the relations with the state. And of course, the relationships is rising to a peak point. And about the statue of the Patriarch, from the very beginning, they did not show any actually changes. And with the Abdulhamid II, the basic problem, the constitutional law and also the regulation have totally been changed about the Armenian citizens, and they have declared a new regulation, and the civilian structures have totally been restructured, and the Patriarch's authority and the civilian leaders and also church-like reorganization have been formed until 1918 in order to survive during the wartime. And after 1918, this practice have been destructed, and they have restructured it according to the structure which was present before the war. And also, the reformation process in the eastern part of the country, for not allowing the actually destructive forces, the state act together with the Patriarch. Famous patriola Varatia Moranian in the First World War, before the war, before undersigning the Ishiki Agreement, during the reform discussions, have had some statements. He's saying that this issue should not be considered as an external suppression. And the problem between the Ottoman Empire and the Armenian citizens is having the barrier of this agreement. If we see it as a suppressive force of the Western people, all of the armed force movements, of course, will be empowered within the borders of Ottoman Empire. If we just collaborate with the Ottoman Empire, and if we support the reforms, the ones who would like to violate these reform movements may be also terminated. Actually, this reformation discussions have continued after the war, and the agreement, the Yeşilköy agreement, was being cancelled after the war. The Patriarch have always tried to play a unifying role in the Armenian problem. It is essential to emphasize this. And of course, the delays in the legal structures and also the disruptions and also lacking points in the legal structure have created some radical foregrounds. Throughout time, they have acted more intermediary, more unifying type of an institution. During my PhD dissertation, I was discussing it with the people in the Patriarch and with the representatives in the Patriarch, and I have published it in my own studies. 1915 decisions, 99%, they were thinking that it was right, it was appropriate. And this 1% is also including that there are some victims and they could not prevent the rights of those victimized people. And this is a fair claim and it needs to be discussed further. And let me conclude my speech like this. I would like to thank everyone for your patience. If there are no questions from internet, I have a few questions, but first of all, I would like to turn to our speakers, to our participants, whether they do have any questions or comments. If I can have an opportunity, I will ask further.
So we have time. So our participants can also ask their questions. Our speakers can ask their questions as well, because I mean, those speeches are being listened right now. So I believe that the discussion session can be very beneficial. We have time as well. Is there anyone who would like to make a comment or who would like to ask a question among our professors? I would like to ask a question, if I may. Well, during his speech, Mr. Kemal said that such kind of studies should be carried out among universities. Could you please, elaborate on that, because you have experience in this field? What kind of a research team and research structure do you think we should establish? What kind of a working group do you think we should establish? Thank you very much, Ms. Yıldız. It's a very important topic. As you know, the High Education Board president, made an official statement, and he stated that an institute which is going to study the war crimes, the genocides, and the crimes against the humanity will be established in Turkey. As of 2005, I have always supported this idea, the establishment of such kind of an institute. Such kind of an institute definitely should be established. And I do believe this institute should be independent from the government bodies, because as you know, in universities, there are many strategic research centers and there are many institutes, but according to the legislation of the Higher Education Board in Turkey, this institute cannot work in open collaboration with the third parties. Let me clarify. Let's assume that this institute is established under the auspices of Hacettepe University. If unfortunately, the legislation almost prevents, hiring a foreign expert in this institute. That's why it should be an independent institute with an independent budget. It should be open to foreign experts as well. And it should be as, independent as possible from the government. So you said that its objectivity is really important. I mean, it's not all about objectivity. It's also about flexibility. Let me give you an example. Let's assume that you have to participate in a very important meeting in the United States of America, and you have to go to that meeting, for example. It's not possible to act so swiftly aligned with the university legislation and regulations, unfortunately. I mean, yes, you can receive the budget from the university, but you have to have good relations with the administrators of the university and etc. So it should be a non-governmental body. I would like to learn what Walsh would like to say about that institute. But the institute, which is going to be established and which is going to study the genocide issues, should be independent from the government. That's what I think. In USA, in Australia, for example, there are genocide research institutes or any international genocide researcher society, for example. They are independent bodies. I mean, they are publishing journals. They don't have any connection with that, with those universities. We have good examples in Turkey, Eurasia Research Society, or SETA Foundation. We have such kind of foundations. They are independent. I mean, if we have the SETA example in Turkey, for example, why do you think we should establish an institute under a university roof? I couldn't understand that. I couldn't find an answer to that. I mean, since I follow the process of establishment of the aforesaid institute, I always said to our friends from the Higher Education Board, this institute should be independent and non-governmental. Well, I also see Yusuf Alaçoğlu. I do believe he will confirm as well. When we were in the Turkish Historical Society, there were certain researchers in the United States of America with whom we have had contact. We have supported some of them. We have invited them to Turkey. They delivered speeches in the panels and webinars in Turkey. And let me give you an example, since we have the head of the Turkish Historical Society with us. There is a researcher, Nicholas Walder, for example, and this researcher stated that the relocation, the deportation to the Armenians, in the Ottoman Empire was not the first. In Philippines, for example, in Africa, a similar deportation book in Turkey, and this researcher couldn't find a job in the United States of America, for example. And Justin McCarthy was the dissertation thesis, and he is repairing roofs right now in order to earn his life, because it is States of America, because the Armenian diaspora are founding, and we can cooperate with certain universities, and we can go there and work as a visiting professor, for example. So if this can be done, then, okay, this institute can be established under the auspices of a university. But if it is going to be just a repetition of any other institute in Turkey, I don't expect an efficient institute structure will be coming to fruition. Any other question from our professors or from our audience? Well, you see it yourself. Well, thank you very much. I don't think that we need to establish a new institute because we have the Turkish Historical Society. We are in need of the legislation change for the Turkish Historical Society because, as you know, Turkish Historical Society has its own income. It is not dependent to the state budget. And at the same time, Turkish Historical Society is a member of the International Academic Union. So if we only amend the law, if we can make, Turkish Historical Society to a sort of academic establishment, then we will not be in need of further institutes. In the Turkish Sciences Academy, there are research centers, for example. I mean, we don't have to establish too many. The institutes should not be established under the universities because the whole status of the universities are really different. But if we can, turn Turkish Historical Society into some sort of an academy with its own academicians, with its own academics, such researches can be carried out easily. By the way, the Turkish Historical Society can even open a branch abroad. And I have, studied this. One of our grand embassies, was empty, and I asked for this building of the grand embassy from Abdullah Gül, who was the foreign minister back then, and we would like to establish a Eurasian Study Institute. And I mean, if such kind of an institute can be founded in that region, it will be very functional. I mean, in Turkey, we have Goethe Institute. I mean, we can establish such an institute abroad. I mean, they have money. I mean, the Turkish Historical Society have enough money, which it receives from İşbank, one of the banks in Turkey. That's why, since that institute will be independent from the state, I mean, his studies will be much more reputational. So we, first of all, are in need of an amendment in the relevant law. In 1936, by the way, Atatürk had the desire of turning the Turkish Historical Society and the Turkish language. Mr. Kemal, for example, went to USA. Hikmet Özdemir, for example, have been studied by two of our societies. So what I'm trying to say, there is abundant document in the Turkish Historical Society. That's why I do believe there is no need for establishing an additional institute. If we can turn the Turkish Historical Society and the Turkish Language Society into a total, full-fledged scientific body, I mean, these bodies can also give scholarships, and any sort of researches can be carried out. The foreign experts can be hired, or the PhD students from Turkey can receive their scholarships, and even we can found an institute at the epicenter of Europe, because the Turkish Historical Society has the monetary power and it is independent from the state budget at the same time. I mean, many academies can be cooperated in Russia, in Europe, or in many other countries. As you know, the academies are receiving annual budget from the state. But the unique feature of the Turkish Historical Society is that it doesn't receive any money from the state. And even their employees are paid by itself. Because Atatürk allocated 1/3 of the budget of İşbank to Turkish Historical Society and Turkish Language Society. Based on the profit of this private bank, I don't know the exact figures right now, 60 or 70 million Turkish liras on an annual basis are allocated to those bodies. As a result, the Turkish Historical Society can accomplish many more things as long as we amend the relevant law. Well, the head of the Turkish Society is with us, Historical Society with us, Birol Çetin. He has experience, and I do believe he will also confirm me. I was the head of that body for the last 15 years, by the way. So, Mr. Kemal, I mean, what we have accomplished within 4 months only, I mean, we have sent our colleagues to abroad for 4 months only to the aforesaid countries, and all of the foreign archives have been screened and copied. Because, I mean, making a research about this issue cannot be carried out solely based on the Ottoman archives. You should also check the archives of the other countries. You shouldn't only search for the archives of the allies of the Ottoman Empire, by the way. If you can collect all those archives, I know that this issue can be much more elaborately assessed, but in the afternoon session, I will go into the details. Birol, Professor Birol, would you like to add something? Thank you very much. I totally agree with Professor Yusuf. We have a certain level of knowledge and experience. We have accumulated documents. We have publications. Our library is very rich, by the way. I agree 100%, but I also would like to state that there is a huge obstacles in the legislation, and we have to change certain laws. And let me give you an example in that regard. We would like to send a couple of our colleagues to the archives in Venice, and they, for example, can collect 30 or 40, documents. This was our plan in the past. And we have worked with the cultural attaché of the Rome in the past, by the way. But unfortunately, I cannot assign academics for long term. If I have to send one of our academicians for 6 months, for example, it is a huge bureaucratic problem for me. I mean, we all make certain plans for our new building. A tender has been carried out, but maybe the new building will not suffice as well for turning our body into a society. As you know, there are many other institutions who should confirm transforming this Turkish Historical Society into an academy. But hopefully we will discuss this issue with the Higher Education Board, YÖK, in Turkey next week. And we know that, although we are an independent, apply for us, and our professors know very well, we have documents from archives of all around the world, and we have them. There is no need for the colleagues and academicians to go abroad in order to find those documents. If they come to the Turkish Historical Society, it is possible to, reach to abundance of those documents. Hopefully, we will discuss with Higher Education Board. As long as they, request something from us, we will do our best to help them for the academic studies. But I totally agree with Mr. Yusuf, and it is always overlooked that we are an independent body, by the way. After the presidential system is, accepted in Turkey, some of the legislation covering our responsibilities and duties actually require refurbishments. And that's why we have asked for the legal counsel of our legal experts. We have, certain bottlenecks and problems regarding to the law on, heritage. And we have to, solve those problems, which can only happen by the amendment of the relevant legislation. As you know, the new constitution is going to be prepared in Turkey, and we also actually send our opinions about it to the assistant of the president as well. And Higher Education Board is problematic as well, because our activities abroad is not covered in the latest legislation, which actually, makes our work much more difficult. So we have to consult those changes. So with an amendment in the relevant legislation, hopefully what we hope we can accomplish will come to fruition. And we will continue with our studies from the points we are. Thank you very much. I would like to ask a question to 4 of our speakers. Do you want me to ask those questions one by one, or all of them at the same time? Could you please unmute yourself, our speakers? So if you like, you can ask this question directly, because we can... Patrick, I have a question for you. Patrick, during the recent times, it was one of the hot topics, Hans Lukas Kaiser, its book on Talat Pasha. And regarding to that book, there was a critic by the patriarch, as you know, Armenian patriarch. So it was actually the controversies of this book. Could you, do you think that, could you summarize those critics one by one? This is my question to Patrick. Could you please make a comment on that book? Thank you.
Well, I did write an article about this book at some point. I'm trying to remember what I wrote in it, actually. It was about, I think, a year ago or so. But I just think this book is, it has a fantastic thesis. It's really ridiculous in a lot of respects. This idea of a sort of it's not as ridiculous as some output that's been recently coming from German scholars. Trying to sort of shoehorn the events in Anatolia into this sort of Holocaust type of thing, and also this idea of 30-year genocide and all this. So he does try to narrow it down into a sort of a war conditions thing. But I find the book very troubling in a lot of respects, and it's very, very misplaced in a lot of its arguments, and sociological. There's another problem with it because it loses its context, its historical context, and it's very, very narrow as a result of this. So I wasn't too impressed, apart from the fact that he had narrowed the issue more so down to a sort of a very distinct period. So he was rejecting ideas that this was a long process of oppression of Armenians by the Ottoman Empire. So he was talking really about something that had occurred in a period of time, really from maybe the Balkan Wars onwards. So in some ways that was the positive side of the book in relation to some of the worst researchers in recent years. But in another respect, it was I found it. I was certainly not convinced by the arguments myself. And I did actually write an article in response to it. But no, I wasn't too impressed with this particular book.
Thank you very much.
İkinci sorunuz.
Pardon me?
Sorunuz bana mı?
Your question addresses me, right? Yes, to you, Mr. Kemal. Okay, I have 3 questions. One of them is one of the general discussions. I mean, they according to their statistics, 160 intellectuals, according to our data, according to their data, 260 intellectuals have been deported or relocated. I mean, Kirkov, Zohar, there are theater, artists, or the authors. Do you think that the intelligence organization can detect their connections with the Armenian paramilitary groups? What do you think about it? The 24th of April, 1915 imprisonment. I mean, if you ask this question 20 years ago, we could have answered as follows. Those ones who are imprisoned are the Armenian intellectuals, or the authors, and they are not connected with the the Armenian revolution. But this was the perception in all around the world. But after we studied the archives, Yusuf Sarunay actually wrote an article about it. Well, we also would like to touch upon that article, but what is missing in Yusuf's article, I mean, for the first time, 235 people have been listed in detail, but the reasons, the specific reasons for the arrests is missing. Balatian, for example, wrote a book in France, and this book really helped us because according to the list prepared by the Armenians, those politicians, journalists, theater artists, it has been found out to which revolutionary parties they are member to. I mean, we have found out that they are the members of Tashnak or Hunchak committees, for example. I mean, even the Armenians are not, covering it, and they have stated that those people are militias. I mean, because in the past there was this allegations that these people were, civilians, and they were claiming that the Ottoman Empire was trying to destroy the intellectual background of those uprisings. But the Ottoman intelligence actually forces have chosen those people meticulously, and they knew very clearly with which militia organizations they have connection with. That's why Balatyan's book should be taken into consideration with the article of Professor Yusuf. But the superiority of Yusuf's article to Balatyan, he gives a much clearer answer regarding to the destiny, of those Armenian people, because the Armenians were claiming that all of them have been found dead. But in the article of Professor Yusuf, he says which of them have died, and which of those people actually have been released. And we have to really assess and analyze those intelligence reports. Secondly, we should also analyze how those people are being released. I have collected many documents from the archives, but I couldn't write it. Kelekyan, for example, one of the very famous journalists. Mehmet Emin Yurdakul, for example, stated that, Mirakyan is my friend. He will not indulge in revolutionary activities, and he wrote a letter to Talat Pasha for him to be acquitted from his crimes. I didn't see any article or book which assess those issues. Kirkor Zorap can also be articulated. Yes, there are many examples that we can articulate at the moment. Well, I can't say that I have seen hundreds of letters, but I have seen like 50 letters, at least in the archive. But unfortunately, none of those letters have been assessed in an article or in a book. This is really important. I do believe this is one of the important points. Well, in your presentation, you have mentioned to this point as well. In the case of, deportation or genocide, the West actually tries to, state that this was not a state policy. Well, according to the genocide law, if we want to define something as a genocide, the senior level officers of the state should act with intention. If you are putting the blame to the whole nation, then the probability of the thesis to be accepted is much more less. That's why they are finding their basis in the Nuremberg trial. I believe Patrick will confirm me as well. Hans Lucas' book is actually serving to that purpose as well. They are trying to, legitimize the accusation of genocide in that book. That's why they are intentionally presenting it as such. I would like to ask this question to Professor Yusuf as well. Hypothetically speaking, if the deportation, relocation is not being implemented, do you think that the independence war can be fought easily? Well, Mr. Yusuf can answer this question in the afternoon session, because if you see the maps, drawn by the English man, you will find the answer. And Yeniköy agreement was, not something which can be accepted according to Talat Pasha. Those statements should be taken very seriously. Well, in the recent times, as you know, there are three very important books. Eugene Rowan about Grigor. Let me remember, I'm getting older. I can't remember the names easily. There was one Iranian researcher, I can't remember his name. According to those three researchers, they state that, what happened if the Ottoman Empire deported Russian invaded anyway. I mean, the ones who are, against the genocide, the Armenians supported the, Russians in their invasion. That is the, argument presented. But these three researchers state that, what happened if you did the deportation and relocation? The Russians came anyway, and they invaded the Eastern Anatolia anyway. So you have done this in vain. The arguments that you are presenting for the sake of security is invalid, they say. I have made a presentation about this. There was this 4 international symposium which was organized due to this commemoration of the independence war. And this presentation was really important because I have reviewed the arguments of those 3 books of the researchers. I would like to ask a question to Professor Feridun. Regarding to the crimes during the deportation, the Talat Pasha initiated, trials. Do we have statistics about the numbers who have been hurt in the court? Well, Mr. Birol actually wrote an article about it. According to the first statistic, it is 1,673 people. But since I didn't carry out a statistical study, I cannot answer this question. Maybe Professor Birol can actually give more detailed information about this issue. So regarding to the names and the statistics, I have no idea how many documents we have. It's not possible for me to answer. Well, Yusuf Sarınay wrote an article in Turkish and English about this for 1916 trials. It is brand new, by the way. And I don't have the information, but there are good articles about it, but there is no book, by the way. We should write a book about it. Well, Professor Feridun, the liberal conservatives in Turkey, they opt for ethnic cleansing. They actually put the Greeks into the same thesis as well. I would like to learn, what do you think about ethnic cleansing? Do you think that it was because ethnic cleansing, according to them, also covers the exchange of population? Well, I cannot agree with this idea. When the Ottoman Empire indulged in the First World War, they didn't know how it will end, because we know that when the war broke out, since the Armenians cooperated with the enemy, they were relocated. And at the end of the day, those lands were part of the Ottoman Empire, by the way. So when they are being relocated, we don't know how many months, how many years this war will last. The previous speaker has also mentioned, they try to present the deportation as if the Ottoman Empire was trying to create a homogeneous society. They should have known the result of the war from the beginning. At the end of the day, each country is waging a war in order to win it, not to lose it. If you say that it was an ethnic cleansing, then we should know that the Ottoman Empire knew the result of the war before even waging it. This, I do believe, is not in line with the science of history. Well, I didn't ask this question for that reason. Ethnic cleansing, legally speaking, they say that it is not in line with the genocide. Legally speaking, do you think there is a difference between them? Well, I couldn't understand your question, so let me rephrase it. They say ethnic cleansing is different from genocide, legally speaking. What do you think? When they are defining the ethnic cleansing, there should be intention. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people can die in a war, which will be okay according to the war law, martial law. But due to ethnic reasons or religious reasons, if you intentionally murder a group of people, then it is subject to genocide. This is clearly stated in the international agreements and conventions. So if the deportation or relocation is not the result of for the winning the war, but for other intentions, and if you are preventing the further births for a simple group of a certain group of people, it can be subject to ethnic cleansing.
In order to have an ethnic cleansing, there should be a problem between Armenian people and also Turkish people because of being Christian. Do they have any attitude related with ethnic cleansing or not? It is something totally different with the interchange, because there are two bilateral countries and there is UN. So two groups are interchanging their places when we speak about mübadele. In order to have ethnic cleansing, actually, they need to be deported from the country. They should be sent off. They should be forced to migrate. So when there is no deportation type of action, actually, they are being, of course, moved, relocated in their own land, in their own country, just like the United States during the Second World War time. They have moved the Japanese people to Mississippi Valley. So they are moving them, relocating them in their own lands. Of course, there are some losses, and there were some losses during the Japan and American War. If they have deported Armenian people, why didn't they deported the Greek people and there were Jewish people? Why didn't they actually created the same action to them? So in order to have ethnic cleansing, of course, it has got a direct relation with genocide, and there is a meaning. When we look at the Ottoman Empire, if there are 50,000 Armenian population inside the army, Ottoman army, they have not been touched. And in Kastamonu, Izmir, in Edirne, other than the members of the guerrilla organizations, they did not have any misbehavior, and they have not been relocated because of being Armenian. Yes, and there are many similar examples that can be given, actually. But it's when we speak about the break times during the wars, for example, because of interfering to the war situation and creating a disadvantage, Justin McCartney takes the same opinion like me. And we are also having the same opinion. They have been relocated for creating conflict. From Turkey, I have given you four different theses, four different perspectives. And the ones who are speaking about ethnic cleansing actually is seeing it as a subcategory of genocide, indeed. But as a crime, it doesn't have any difference on the legal side. Of course, in 1948, before 1948, it has occurred. So it's a matter of discussion. But our main argument, in order to be proposed, we need to just have the idea of creating the tendency of homogeneous population. And Arabic people have been relocated to Anatolia. 160,000 Arabic people have been relocated. Fuat Gündar at Economy and Technology University at the Department of Political Sciences, he's an academician, has got a thesis about ethnical engineering, demography engineering, and these theses have been presented. Ahmet Efiloğlu has not written in English and speaking about diaspora issues, and against these theses, when someone writes something, it is not being widely known. And ethnical cleansing issue actually have been researched, but it's in Turkish. And it is totally arguing and proving the evidences against these claims, these ethnic cleansing claims. So there is also an article which needs to be translated in English and published in English. So there are some researches, a lot of things to be done. Let me address my last question to Ramazan Bey. Ramazan Bey, about these relationships with the patriarch, we have listened many things from you. Do we have any establishment of gun storage establishment, whether there is a case, there is a tragic event, any determination which you have heard? Just on the contrary, there have been some attacks from the guerrilla forces to the patriarch, and the first Armenian terrorist attack was being done to the Armenian patriarch of that time. The patriarch was not supporting the communities, the guerrilla communities' actions, and he was also informing the state about those actions. And the first attack in 1890 has been done to the patriarchal institution, and in 1894 they have had a second attack. And in 1903, Patriarch Armenian have had another attack. So for the Armenian committees, actually, they have been seen as an institution of the state. The churches and the Patriarch have always been facing with the attacks of those committees, guerrilla committees. And so in the Anatolian regions, the local religious people were having close relationships with those committees, which is obvious. But when we look at the center, the central patriarchs and church were not having any relationships with those committees, actually. I have tried to moderate the session as much as I can. It was very valuable, actually, to hear all of those opinions. Süleyman Bey is asking for the floor, I think. Süleyman Bey. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to everyone 2 times. You have brought to the topic to my point. Let me express my opinions. 1915 and 1916 judgments, trials. I've got an article, Feridun Bey mentioned about it, that's right. Bülent Bey is a PhD dissertation also allocates a section for that, but there is no independent research or book about this topic, these trials. The Armenian 5, Kamran Gürş, is pointing out a figure and was basing on a document. It was 30,042. And when we were looking at the archives of Ottoman Empire, we were not able to figure that. And if someone have taken them into consideration, I have also taken it from the international relations records and archives. It is essential to make some studies, but they are just in lists of names. And it is only written what type of crimes they have carried out in these lists, and the justifications are not being mentioned in these lists, why they have been punished and how long they have been punished. Those informations are not present, actually. We need to have a further study and a further publication. And all of those international relationship and international politics documents have started to appear on the stage. So Feridun Bey's study is very valuable. However, 1915-1916 trials needs to be clearly become obvious, crystal clear, unless we have articles. I have an article. It is not enough. We need to have documents. We need to have clear-cut evidences to make it crystal clear. There is another topic to be mentioned. Kamran Gürş. I have mentioned and asked him, where did you find this? 235 is also uncertain, and they were also mentioning 2,435 in the old studies. And when we look at the Armenian committees and also their presence, it is actually 235 in numbers, and the arrested ones in the trials who were taken under custody, let me not say arrested, let me say who were taken under custody, is only 600. And it is essential to make further studies to clearly define. And when we speak about the deportation, I mean the Greek deportation, Arabic deportation, are they ethnic cleansing or not? They are not the exchange of actually populations. And on behalf of the Greek people, it was decided in Lausanne, and actually Greek deportation has taken place and Arabic deportation has taken place in our lands due to some reasons. We have relocated them due to war reasons. We have relocated. We cannot consider them as ethnic cleansing legally or in any other way. I would like to emphasize this point, and in-depth analysis will be present many topics more clearly, and of course they should be done with the hands of the actually academicians, and should be presented to the public, and they should be of course published in English. If you do not publish them in English, they are not being accessed, and they are not being actually proving and creating an evidence-based information. And so contrary thesis to genocide, I have said, okay, anti-genocide thesis after a while is making you a part, and you are starting to be ignored as a part of this discussion because you are selecting a side, and you should not become a side. You should keep your objective standing point. So you need to have evidences, and you need to establish, you need to maybe found an institution, independent institution, as you have referred, and keeping it independent and making it work independently, and having a financial independence, having an administrative independence will be really fulfilling its function. Okay, as the chair of the session, Patrick is with us, and he made a very good assessment about the Caucasian side, and he has pointed out the Putin's approach, and he has just pointed out the fact that he is aiming to have Putin back, despite the fact that he's a defeated leader. He is going to be preferred being foreshadowing point. So it was a very fruitful discussion. Ramazan Erhan Güloğlu, there is a generalization. Armenian patriarch is being assaulted and accused, and also there are some declarations. We are having, we are getting rid of this ignorant view, and we need to get in contact, and we need to integrate our researches with our historians and abroad. International historical researchers, actually tie has been weakened in the recent years. We need to rebound our relationships, and I'm doing my best to achieve this. We need to increase the level of ties